Welcome back, my favorite game developers. In this video we are going to be fixing a couple of bugs or inconveniences in our boss's movement. So now when we run the game, there are a couple of small tweaks that you might not notice. So for example, now if we go away, we don't have the double attack, and we also can see that our enemy is being flipped every single time. So with that out of the way, let's not waste any more time and let's get to flipping. Okay, so now that we have established the first type of walking and a bit of a attacking, next thing we're going to do is we're going to be fixing the boss movement, and we're going to be moving forward with it throughout the entire boss state machine setup. So let's get started. The first thing I want to fix is the double attack. What's the double attack? Well, if I run the game, I'm going to keep it as it is right here. As you can see, he comes close, he attacks once, twice. If I get away, he still attacks once. So 1, 2, this is the double attack. We don't want that to happen. So in order to avoid it, I'm going to open up the Visual Studio in here, and on the on state exit, so when we exit from the boss walk, I'm going to go ahead and access the animator, and I'm going to reset the trigger. So in here I'm going to say again attack. So what this will do is, you can see right here, when we are in a certain distance, we trigger the attack, so we go into the attack, but then as soon as we exit from the walking, we are going to reset the trigger, so we are no longer in the attack. So back in here, we no longer attack twice. So now if I run the game, the boss enemy should only attack once. So he attacks, we go away, there we go, you can see that he only attacks once. Great. With that fixed, the next thing I would like to fix is the attacking animation. So you'll notice that he doesn't do the full 2 swings up and down. You'll notice only one up and then he stops. Why is that? Well, because it's of the exit time right here on the transition. So if I click on the Skelly, and you'll notice here on the preview, when I make the game run, he shoots once and then he goes back to walking, which is not something that we want. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the exit time to play about 90% of the move. Yep, there we go, maybe even more, just a little bit more, so maybe 97-ish of the move. Let's see how that looks. And all of this needs to be calibrated based on how you want your game to feel. So there we go, we attack once, twice, down and down. Then again we start walking. Excellent. One more thing that is a little bit bothering in here is the exit time on the walking to the attack. So now we have everything set up. So now we should see a bit of a smoother way. There we go. So we attack, we walk a bit, we attack, we walk a bit, we attack, we walk a bit, and we keep pushing towards the player. But obviously there is one thing still missing, and that is that the enemy isn't looking in our direction, which is something I would call a huge problem because of the way our melee attack will be set up. So let's fix that. The first thing we're going to do is, obviously, we are going to rotate the player just like we rotated the enemies. But where do we do this? We might want to do this in the walking. Well, what if we are attacking? We also want to be looking at the player. And shouldn't we be also looking at the player and shooting? So this seems to be something that is more general and not state based. So we are going to create a script in here that is called the boss controller. And I'm going to wait for it to compile and add this boss controller to the Skelly boss game object in here. And in here I'm going to first of all get a reference to the player to chase. So a private void, did I say void? I meant transform, and the player to chase. There we go. Save that. Now in start, I'm going to go ahead and say that the player to chase is equal to the find object of type, the player controller, and I'm going to go ahead and access the transform on that. So now we have the player to chase ready to go. Now the next thing to do is to actually start flipping the boss whenever the player goes from one side to the next of the enemy. So because we've done this already, I'm going to issue you it as a challenge, and your challenge is to rotate the boss in the right direction. So first of all, check for the position of the boss relative to the player's position. Remember, we get that through the transforms. Based on that, rotate the boss transform around the y-axis, so you'll need to flip 180 degrees. So it's similar to the way we were flipping the weapons, not just the enemy. You'll need to add the other way around, of course, obviously, and then call that method before walking the enemy. Test it out. Is there a problem? Why is there a problem? So you will obviously encounter a problem. No worries about that. Do your best, find the flipping way, and I'll see you in just a bit. Okay, welcome back. So in the update, I'm going to check if the transform dot position dot x, which is that of the boss, is greater than the player to chase dot position dot x. And by the way, this is based on how the boss is initially looking. So if he was looking the other way around, we might have wanted to check this the other way around. So anyways, if the position of the boss is greater than the position of the player to chase, obviously on the x-axis only, then what we're going to do is in here we are going to get the transform dot position, and we are going to the transform dot rotate. Where is it? Rotate, and then 0f on the x-axis and 180f on the y-axis and 0f on the z-axis. And why is that? If we go back into our game and if we get the skelly boss, if we do a rotation right here, there you go, you can see that he rotates the other way around, which is exactly what we want. So we are going to also make sure that else if the transform dot position, but this time it's the other way around, that means that the player is on, oops, what happened? If the player is on the other way, then we are going to make sure to flip the enemy back again. So there we go, save that. So now if we go back in here, and what's the problem? So maybe we did a typo in here. Yep, there we go. So back in our game, we run the game. Let's see what happens. And there we go. So obviously there is a small problem. What's the problem? Obviously our boss enemy is having some kind of a seizure. And why is that happening? Well, because we are trying to flip. So notice what happens in here on the rotation. We are flipping and then we are flipping back. We are trying to flip the enemy, the boss, based on the player's direction, but because we are calling it every single frame and because of the animation that makes us walk in a certain direction, we are having this constant flipping all the time. So what we're going to do is back in here, we are going to create a variable that will check if we have flipped or not. So in here, I'm going to create a public, and just to keep it public for now, obviously we will not keep public forever. So if is flipped, flip it, and I'm going to set it to false at the beginning. So in here, we're going to check if we have flipped. That means is flipped is equal to false, because this is the regular direction that we're looking at. If the player is on the left side right here, so if the player is on the left side, we don't want to be flipped. And in here, is flipped is equal to true. Sorry, for some reason the tab isn't taking what I want. Visual Studio community isn't keeping up with me. And then we are going to add it in here into our conditions. So if the player is on the left side and and is flipped, so he is flipped, then we are going to flip him back to the other side. And in here, if he is not flipped, then we are going to flip him back. So I hope you understand what's happening in here. First of all, we have the is flipped. At the beginning, it's false. So in here, this will not work. Only when the player is on the other side of the pass and we have not flipped, then we'll flip. We'll set this to true, and this will allow us to not flip back again when we are obviously not needing to be flipped. So run the game, and you'll notice now that the enemy appears. He goes after us. Obviously the distance needs to be adjusted a bit, and then when we go to the other side, where is the is flipped? There we go. You can see that, there we go, he is flipped. He is flipped. Okay, he is not flipped. He is flipped. He is not flipped. So there we go. Now we have better movement, better animation transitions, maybe a better distance management would be good. So 5 I think is a lot, maybe 3.5 is a good number. I don't want the player, or actually the enemy, to be hitting the player. So maybe even 3 is good. I'll save that. We added a bit of transition. Take your time and play around with the transitions and make them perfect the way you would like to. With that out of the way, make sure to commit your changes. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video where we will be setting up the actual melee attack and start hurting our player and not just swinging aimlessly. So, see you then.